Good morning.
Good afternoon, right? Today?
Wherever you're at in life.
It's afternoon for us right now.
It's afternoon for us, but I was saying good morning to all my Taiwanese listeners if they're out there.
They're not. According to the analytics, they are not. Yet, you know.
Not yet. We have some Germans. To all my Germans, good morning.
Do have Germans. And see, here's the really crazy thing about a podcast. Just a shameless plug for podcasts, right? I'm a very avid listener of the Unashamed podcast, right, with the Robertsons. But I was talking to Hayden, who is my sister's boyfriend.
Whoa!
And I was like, "Hey, you should listen to this podcast." And he goes, "Okay, cool. Where should I start?" I was like, "Well, I mean, they're kind of like 900 and something episodes in.
Start
like,
wherever."
I said, I probably started listening in this 500 or 600 somewhere. He goes, I'm gonna start with 1. So he went all the way back to 1, and it honestly intrigued me. I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna start back at 1.
Wow.
So
how
I've
old,
started
how
back
old
at
was
1.
number 1?
2019.
2019.
My point is,
So it's now 5 years old?
5 years old.
Wow.
And I know of 3 people here in Greene County who have now started at number 1, the pilot, and are working our way up to the current airings. All that to say, we said right now, there are no Taiwanese listeners.
All I can say is, in 5 years,
There may be.
There may be, but in 5 years, you name dropped Hayden as your sister's boyfriend, so he better be the one because he may. I'm just saying.
True. Who
I'm just
knows?
saying.
We'll see.
I like Hayden. He's a good dude.
Yeah, I don't know how I got off on that tangent.
Well, because I talked about my German and Taiwanese audience.
That's true.
Because it may be morning time over there. I don't know. I don't know what time it is right now.
As of today of recording this, 2024, our current analytics don't support that we have Taiwanese listeners.
But do we have German listeners, though?
We might 5 years from now. So that's the cool thing about a podcast.
I'm speaking it into
It's a
existence.
shameless plug about podcasts.
I'm claiming it.
No, just start that podcast.
Start it. Claim it.
Yeah, I'm not big into like speaking into the, I'm speaking it. No, I don't get into all that. But
none of that voodoo
if
for
you
Collins.
do want to start a podcast because you may be 900 and some episodes into this sucker.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody may be like, you know what? I don't want to start right here. I want to listen all the way through. It's no different than it's literally no different than when you discover a Netflix show or something. And you're like, you know what? I know they're currently producing season 12. Let's start at the pilot.
I think if you don't start a podcast, you may be making a mistake. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
Yeah, there you go. We got a checklist if you want to. For real, like we've got a checklist.
Check out the podcast guide.
It can get you started.
Description below.
But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about photo mistakes. Mistakes that photographers make. And I can say these mistakes are mistakes with confidence because, yes,
yesterday
I have made them. And you know what? Truth be told, still probably make some of them. So trying to help you out, avoid those mistakes, avoid that pain. Just avoid it. Listen to us. Not because we know everything, because we make them all regularly. What is it that dude, the State Farm dude, says? We know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two.
Yep.
Yeah, well, we know what mistakes are because we've made mistakes. But first, let's thank our sponsor. Sponsor for today's episode. Ooh,
that was ASMR.
You got all soft on us there.
Yeah, normally I go loud with it. Sponsor for today's episode of Faith and Frames is none other than us. Jared and Garrett here at Motion Creative Media and our blue collar LUT. Folks, if you are looking for a drag and drop, plug and play filter solution for your video footage, whether it be from your iPhone, DSLR camera, mirrorless camera, or potato, whatever you're shooting on, look no further than the blue collar LUT. It is a creative filter that you can drag onto your footage to give yourself some pizzazz, some spice, some sizzle.
A little bit of punch
for your TikToks and grams.
Nice.
If you'd like to download that, link is in the description below.
Yeah.
I'd love to see the results that you get from it.
Tag us.
Jared,
Let us know when you use it.
Thank you for sponsoring this episode of Faith
Hey,
Frames.
thank you, dude. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. It is my pleasure. Meat and taters. Get us the meat and taters. We are talking mistakes that photographers make.
So I wrote one down.
Yes.
Which is maybe news to everybody that we write things down. That you stated. So I'll let you take it away, but I did write it down. And you basically stated Too much gear too soon.
Yeah, this is a mistake that I see very often, and a mistake that I would say even into my professional career I have made. Thinking that I have to have either the newest, best, latest, greatest, most superfluous gear that's in existence. And that's just not the case. I think that a lot of people get inundated, and we know this because we get questions pretty regularly. What should I buy? I saw that this person has this camera and I need this camera.
Right.
I saw that this person has this lens and I need this. I think too many people, whenever they get started, especially, worry so much about the gear side.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and say that gear doesn't matter, because it does to a point, and we may talk about that in the future. But I will say that depending on the style of photography that you're shooting, or your budget, or whatever limitations you may have, don't get so inundated in the gear talk that you forget about the things that matter, like learning the craft of photography,
Right.
what good composition looks like, how to expose an image,
Right.
Working on education, really finding somebody that you can lean on that will teach you good photography. So don't get caught up in the beginning with trying to accumulate so much gear that you don't have the budget to learn.
Right.
If you're not utilizing free tools, but B, it's a very, very large rabbit hole that you can fall down into that you may not actually have to.
Too much gear too soon is a big thing.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: if you keep doing this, and if you care the least bit about the actual tech behind cameras, like it's gonna be it's unavoidable.
Right,
like
you're gonna accumulate crap.
You're gonna get gas, which is gear acquisition syndrome.
You're gonna accumulate regardless.
You're gonna want to stay up on the tech, and like it's gonna be exciting because Sony just released this new thing. But that's really not necessary. And I'll even go a step further in the sense that if you watch any YouTube, for instance, one of my favorite photographers, and I talk about him all the time, but he's truly one of my favorite photographers, and he's one of my favorite channels to watch, James Popsis.
Yes.
He talks all the time, and what inevitably happens when someone starts, they get their first bit of gear.
Yeah.
Then they're like, oh, I've got to build my gear toolkit. I've got to build my, and you end up with so many lenses. Then you get to a point in your career, most cases, where you're like, I need downsize.
Yeah. I've got too much crap.
I've got too much stuff and I just don't use it all. And so what he does is, and he travels a lot. So a lot of it's weight savings. It's what do I physically want to have on my back. But it also like boasts creativity in the sense of if you create limitations for yourself,
you're going to have to adapt.
You have to adapt. Versus you can also, the opposite side of that is if you have too much gear, it can become kind of crippling in the sense of like you've got all of these options.
But you got too many options.
And you don't necessarily make choices, or you might make the wrong choice versus really getting good with that lens. Yeah. We'll talk lenses for a specific
lens, camera,
instance.
whatever.
I know, for instance, we talked about them before, Bonnie and
Jennifer.
Male.
Oh, yeah, and Male.
Male specifically, I dare say they shoot 95% of their work on a 35 millimeter lens.
Yeah. I know Bonnie does for sure.
Now, could they not get good portraits and good work with other lenses? No, that's not what I'm saying. But they don't need all this other gear.
Right. They've mastered what they are good at with minimal gear.
Yeah. So you don't need a poop ton of gear to get started.
No. And you don't always need the latest and greatest. And I tell people this a lot whenever they've asked me, what camera should I buy? What should I look at here? My favorite digital camera currently in my arsenal was released in 2015. My X Pro 2.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, where are you going with that?
Yeah, that's my favorite camera in the arsenal right now. So it's a 10-year-old camera.
Yep. That
still yields, for me, my favorite results with my photography.
Here's something I'll tell you. I typically shoot my photos with a, which it's not new, but it is newer tech in the sense that it's mirrorless. I typically shoot with a Canon EOS R.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any RF glass, so I use an EF to RF Canon adapter, and I adapt to EF glass. Well, I needed to loan out that adapter and a lens to another entity here in Greenville. which meant, because I don't have any RF glass,
Mm-hmm.
meant that I couldn't use my EOS R body.
Right. So you've been back on the 5D, haven't you?
So I had, as fate would have it, we had two events. We had a Gimme Golf event that I had to cover and Star Fitness, so our retainer client, and you were gone. So I had to cover both of those things, and I had to resort to my Canon 5D Mark III, which I'm pretty sure was released in 2014.
I was going to say it
or
was
12 maybe
I think it was 12.
So
the 5D2 was 2010.
It's more than 10 years old at this point.
And
here's the thing.
You're using it for professional work?
I was paid to use it twice in the last 4 days.
Which, fun fact, that was their flagship back in the days.
No, I mean, it's a great camera.
But age-wise, it's not new. It's not the latest and greatest.
It's a great camera. And truly,
it still has a dad burn mirror inside of it.
It does. It's DSLR. I got those photos back from Gimme Golf when I started to edit in those. And I've got a preset for Gimme Golf, so like it makes the editing workflow really easy. Yeah. I pasted that on there because it's all Canon, so the colors matched up nicely. But I pasted that on all my photos as I imported them into Lightroom, and I'm going through and I'm doing my pics, and I'm like, man, this camera still holds up today in 2024. So, yes, all that to say, you do not need the latest and greatest. No. You do not need a plethora of gear.
Like I said with the X Pro, it's called the X Pro for a reason.
Yeah, you're using the X Pro 2, which I think they've got a third one out.
Yeah, X Pro 3. About to release the fourth that I'll not be buying because the X Pro 2 is good enough.
Honestly, if the 5D3 had a tiltable screen or even touch screen,
would that be your bay?
I would still use it.
It'd be your bay.
It is limiting after using some of the newer tech, like
I mean the X Pro 2. It's a pain in the butt if I'm trying to get any low angles because its screen is fixed too. Yeah. So like that's very pain in the butt.
That's really the only time it comes into place,
right?
Because I'm old school. I still typically prefer.
I like my viewfinder.
I like my eyepiece. I'm not an LCD shooter. Right. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what I'm accustomed to doing.
Nothing wrong with it, but as far as camera experience goes, I just like having it up to my eye.
So in some cases, not being able to get those low angles without literally laying on the ground, which I had to do at Gimme Golf, and it worked out.
I have no problem doing that. It is what it is. But you do not need all the newest, latest, greatest gear.
Absolutely. Learn and master what you have.
Yeah. Take us to the next one, Jared. This is one that you brought up in conversation. I thought it was very interesting.
It's tough. It's really tough, and I mostly see it with beginner photographers. And I'm going to call it inconsistent colors throughout a set of images.
It's like an inconsistent edit.
Yeah, and what I mean by that is like I've even seen it on like minis, right? That I know the whole session, because it's advertised as 15 minutes, right? I know that the light didn't change that much.
Yeah.
And most of those minis are you set up a backdrop.
Yeah, you got one setup.
So very little is changing. The camera's not moving and all those things. So it comes down to inconsistent editing.
Yeah.
And I think maybe what is maybe happening is people don't look at the set of the images as a whole before they deliver it. And all that I mean by that is like if your scene is dang near the same and the lighting clearly didn't change. Now if you've got overcast and sunny popping in and out, things are going to change.
Different,
like that's different. But these are blatant instances of like, okay, it doesn't appear that you looked at your whole set.
Right.
And what I mean by that is like if you picked your top 15 images, look at all 15 of them consecutively. It's
and if you're in Lightroom, just go to library view.
And I wonder if people aren't looking in Lightroom. I wonder, and I've thought about that.
I know some people cull beforehand.
Some people do cull
beforehand. But if you are in Lightroom specifically, just open up library view, or you can do your slideshow view and just pop through all your images.
And you can look, and it's like you'll notice it. Typically, it's more obvious with color, but it also can come into luminance.
Luminance and white balance changes, especially if you're shooting auto white balance, which I know a lot of people still do. Like, there's going to be some differences there because you may have metered differently depending on where you pointed your camera.
Right. But your whole set should look consistent.
Yeah.
Right? It should be consistent image to image, in my opinion. I think that really sets a beginner from a really seasoned photographer. You look at some of your seasoned photographers and you look at their whole set and you're like, oh, yeah, skin's the same brightness value.
Yeah.
It's the same color. And you're going to always have some variance, especially if you shoot for an hour, like the lighting and stuff does change. But overall, is having inconsistent colors and editing throughout a set of images. Like I've seen some really, really blatantly bad ones, specifically regarding white balance. It's like, oh, that one looks really warm. That looks really good. And then the very next image that I can tell was not shot very much longer after is very cool.
Yeah. Well, and I see a big difference too sometimes. And again, I've made this same mistake. Yeah. And I think it's because when we're editing, we forget what we did 200 images ago.
Yes.
You know how many we shot. And before you learn to use presets and copy and paste, the habit is to edit everything individually.
Yeah.
But I noticed a lot of the times with black and white specifically, some images will have, very dark blacks or very bright whites, and then the others will have like a faded film look.
So you're taking even color out of the equation there.
Right.
We're strictly looking luminance values there.
Yeah,
and that's the same set of images.
Big differences.
So yeah, I would just suggest.
And I've made that mistake.
Oh, I look back at some of my older sets, like not even a year ago, and I'm like, I could have matched those.
I could have just copied and pasted that preset.
I could have matched those a lot better.
Yeah.
So I would, this is a problem that I see, and if you notice, like, man, there is something different. A good exercise before you do your final export, and specifically before you do your final delivery, look at the whole set of images. If you're delivering 20 images, thumb through them really quickly.
Yeah.
Your eyes are going to like pick out those
they'll
differences.
pick up on the differences.
It's like, oh, you know what? That one was way brighter than it needed to be. Go fix that image.
This one was orange. This one was blue.
You're going to be able to fix those things if you look at the set as a whole, as opposed to each image.
Yep.
Because each image on its own may look fine.
Well, your eye is going to start developing a bias towards that image.
It will.
So it's going to look.
If you spent hours editing.
Right. If you've spent hours editing, eye fatigue is a big thing, which is why we encourage breaks. But there's going to be some bias towards the image that you're on. So take a step back. Maybe go take you a 10-minute break.
Oh, yeah.
A little siesta if you're
yeah.
feeling a little sleepy.
Oh, yes.
Come back and look at the entire set before you deliver.
Oh, that reminds me. Have you seen those trends or those reels? I've seen them several times. Especially if it's like a late night editing session, you're just beat bopping. You feel like it is.
Oh, yeah. And you come back the next morning.
And you're like,
it looks like Shrek.
What did I do? I remember thinking this was good.
I have a guilty confession to make. I actually did that this morning because.
Were you still pleased with the results this morning?
No. And if anybody follows me on Threads or even Instagram, I got home from the beach and I was very eager to develop some rolls of film that I'd shot. And so I developed them last night. I waited around for them to dry and went ahead and started scanning them and editing them. Came back this morning, looked at those scans and edits, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
I have forgotten how to photography.
It happens. It
happens to everyone.
So, yes. Strive to have a consistent look, cohesive look throughout your sets. Now, you don't necessarily have to have it set for set.
Right.
Because if you shoot, you could even shoot like 2 days back to back, and the lighting is completely different. I'm not saying that
set to
what
set
you
they
shot
don't have to match
Tuesday
up.
has to match what you shot Wednesday.
Yeah, that would be rather boring, actually.
But your set should have some cohesiveness.
Yeah, within a set, all of your images
So
should
look
be
at
the
your full set, fix your differences.
Agreed.
You'll like yourself better.
Agreed. Moving on, we have a couple of back-to-backers right here that I think are, well...
This is kind of like the...
yeah, the little angel and devil on the shoulders.
Right.
They're definitely on different ends of the spectrum, specifically the light spectrum.
That's what you did there.
How'd you like that?
Yeah.
Pretty good. Jared, let's tackle this point first. Too bright. I'm editing my images too bright.
Overexposing your images.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can tell.
Yeah.
A trained eye can tell. Like if you've seen enough images and if you've made the mistake enough yourself like I have, you can tell like this was captured overexposed.
Yes.
You did not capture the proper exposure. This wasn't an editing style.
Right.
This was captured.
Yeah.
Your highlights are blown.
Gone.
They're blown. There's no detail there. It doesn't matter if you take that to negative 600, which you can't do in Lightroom, but if you could, there's no detail there.
They're as white as a marshmallow.
So, and it's not the end of the world if you do that with your sky.
Right.
But where it comes into play is when it,
Like skin tones.
yes,
highlights on the skin.
If you've got light that is a very hot spot, a very high or a very hot highlight,
Yeah.
and you've blown that on your subject's face, that's something that's not it's not repairable.
Well, yeah, it's not recoverable, and it screams amateur. And again, I say that because I've made that mistake many times, but especially with digital, and this is where film and digital kind of differ.
True.
With film, it's okay to overexpose quite a bit. It can handle having very hot highlights, but digital specifically
Struggles.
It struggles capturing highlight data and specifically retaining highlight data. So we've said this a couple of times when it comes to digital photography. If you are trying to go for a brighter look, get your exposure right in camera, raise it later.
Which is a thing. Bright and airy.
That's bright and airy is a style.
That's a style.
That's a very popular
it's
style.
a style that's been around for a while. It may
Right.
be around for a long time.
Very
if that's
popular
your
style.
thing.
But do it properly. Don't
Yes.
accidentally blow everything.
I'll
and
tell you
think
this.
that's bright
The
and airy.
people who are really good at it are not capturing their images that way.
Right.
In camera.
They're getting proper exposure, doing it in post.
And doing
Yes.
it in post. It's the same way with James Popsis. He captures his images with a proper exposure.
Yeah.
But if you look at his edited image, and he's called out about this all the time, people are like, James, you blew the highlights.
Yeah.
The whole sky's gone. Well, no.
No, it's not
if
gone.
you
It's
see
just
his
hot.
raw, like it's there. He edits it that way because of his style, and he says, look, if this isn't part of the subject,
Yeah, I don't want it.
I don't want it to distract from the
It
subject.
doesn't help the story.
So he will raise those luminance values.
Right.
But he's never capturing them blown. Like so be mindful of capturing your images and just don't overexpose them, because you can't fix that in post.
No, not especially not on a digital image. So be very mindful of that. On the opposite end of that light spectrum,
Yeah.
we have images that are shot too dark or underexposed.
Right.
Very underexposed images, whether it be accidental, on purpose, or you just didn't know what you were doing. Again, made this mistake plenty of times.
Yes.
But maybe you're going for a moody look or a darker look to
Yeah.
tell a different story in your images. I see a lot of folks too in the beginning go way too dark in camera.
I think the pitfall, and I believe this is the reason why we see this issue on both ends of the spectrum, is you see an editing style.
Yeah.
And this is where you've drawn inspiration. This is what you
Yeah.
like. This is what you're trying to achieve.
Trying to emulate it.
You need to understand they're not capturing it in camera that way.
Right.
They're capturing a proper exposure.
Right.
And they're bringing it in that direction in post-production.
Yeah.
So same thing with underexposing an image. Now I will say this, digital cameras do handle shadows better
Yeah, they handle underexposure better
than they
film.
do overexposure. But there comes a point where
It's still gonna be gone.
If you way underexposed an image,
You're not going to be able to bring it back.
and you're going to attempt to raise those shadows or those black
have a
levels
lot
in
of
post,
noise.
detail's not going to be there, but noise is.
yeah,
Hello.
you have a lot of noise.
So it's just a situation of make sure that you are capturing the proper exposure. And here's something that I was, if you're not shooting a mirrorless camera where you're seeing your exposure live in
Yeah,
your EVF or your LCD, shooting a DSLR camera,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of people are.
Yep.
Heck, I found myself in the last week twice using DSLR
Back on
cameras.
DSLR.
What you need to do is just be mindful of it.
Yeah.
And so
watch your meter.
your meter is going to help you, but the big telltale is going to be after you fire a frame.
Yeah.
Like fire frame,
Check that.
check your screens
Yep.
like, ooh, I'm a little dark. I
Yeah.
know the meter said it was 0, right?
Check
it
that
says it
bad
was
boy.
proper. Okay, well, in that case, you may need to raise your exposure comp if you're shooting an average priority or whatever so that you achieve the proper exposure. Overall, those two things, deal with exposure
Yeah.
and trends, and something you've drawn inspiration from. Just know they're
You
not
still need to get
capturing
it
it.
right
Yeah,
in
get it
camera.
right
Yeah.
in camera. Get your exposure right in camera
Dial in the look in post
in
production.
post-production.
Yeah.
That's how they achieve those.
So speaking of lights and darks, this leads us to probably our last point of this topic, but trend chasing. There's a reason that a lot of the times, especially as beginners, we struggle with shooting things too bright or shooting things too dark. It's because we've seen something that we like.
Right?
We're trying to copy it.
Yeah.
Or emulate it, whatever you want to say. And we do it improperly. But I would say overall, overall the idea of trend chasing, especially in photography, something to be very mindful of, and I think a mistake that a lot of photographers make. We've talked about this before, Jared, but it's okay whenever you first start shooting to go shoot anything and everything.
Yep.
You've got to figure out what you like.
Yeah.
And even with styles, making stylistic choices or finding a photographer that you like, and trying to emulate that, perfectly okay with that. But when it comes specifically to trends, I know one that you and I harp on quite a bit, is back about 5 to 6 years ago, what I'm going to call the Oompa Loompa edit.
Yeah, it was bad.
Where we had no greens, no yellows, but by golly, everybody was orange.
Yep.
Be careful chasing trends. I think that one thing you'll never go wrong with is learning a photography style and an editing style that is what we'll call timeless.
Yeah.
So whether that is a bright and airy, properly done, or a dark and moody, properly done.
Right.
I think those two specifically will probably stand the test of time from here till kingdom come, unless something miraculous happens in the photography world. But as far as like your specialty trends like the Oompa Loompas, I know if you guys remember a few episodes ago, my big
teal and orange
mistake was the TO, the teal and orange look. I leaned very heavily into that, very wrongly, very bigly wrongly, with the teal and orange. So specifically the trends that are like hot today trends, be careful following those.
Well, be careful following them and implementing them into all of your work. Again, if there's something that you like from a trend,
sprinkle it,
pick that facet out, and start sprinkling it in there. And
what did we have back in the day? Salt Bay. You Salt Bay it in there.
Oh, that was a that was a
COVID thing.
Blast from the past.
Yeah, that was a COVID thing. Salt Bay.
Just be aware of trends. They're a trend because they're a trend. They're going to change.
It's a trap.
It's a trap. Yeah, we could.
Where's the Star Wars meme?
Insert the Star Wars dude, right? Where he says
it's a trap.
But all I'm trying to say is I'm trying to caution you, because here's the thing. When you first start out, you're going to be drawing inspiration from somewhere. I encourage you to do that. Here's the thing. There's nothing new under the sun.
No.
It's all been done.
You're not reinventing photography.
You're not reinventing. So don't put pressure on yourself to do it or to be the most unique person ever.
What is it the kids are saying these days? Don't try to be a clout demon.
Oh, Dad. Absolutely.
Don't
be a demon anyways.
Yeah, don't be a demon anyways, but definitely not for clout in the photography game.
So just be aware that these trends are going to come and go. Like I've seen them. They're going to come and go. Mm-hmm. But if you can master a timeless editing style, and what I basically mean by that is what I consider timeless is where your hues, your colors are not too far one way or the other.
Not so skewed that 10 years from now you're like, oh my gosh,
it's not believable. Like it needs to still be, in my opinion, believable. That's what I would consider timeless.
Unless you're an abstract photographer, and that's a totally different discussion.
Totally different thing. I'm mostly talking about like portrait photography.
Yeah, if you're a portrait
or landscape photography.
Go with something that you and your clients can look back on 10 years from now and be like, that still does it for me.
Yeah.
That still checks my box.
That still does it. So just avoid trends.
Yeah.
They're fun to play with.
Yeah,
but
they're fun to entertain.
I wouldn't, throw my anchor overboard here on a trend is what I'm getting at.
I wouldn't throw a trend into my portfolio long term.
No.
Or short term.
No.
They're fun. They're fun to play with. Yes,
they are fun to play with. And here's a really fun exercise. And I didn't mean to say this necessarily.
It's good to challenge yourself sometimes.
It really is fun. Like it can be. It's like if you see something that's like, how'd they do that?
Yeah,
go try
it
it
out.
Go try to do it, because that's a really fun exercise. Reinventing and retroactively engineering. It's like, okay.
Heck, it might get you.
That's how they did that.
Might get you a couple viral hits on the gram and the TikTok.
It might just do that.
That's what you're after.
But for your overall editing style, I would caution you,
keep it classy.
Avoid the trends as much as possible, and settle on something that you consider timeless. And it's hard to know what we're going to like in the future.
Yeah,
but you can kind of look back at the past and say, hey, you know what? This image was 10 years ago.
It still holds up.
It's still good. Figure out why. Figure out why you think that still holds up.
Yeah.
Stick with that.
I like that. That those are some things that we've noticed, and again, mistakes that we've made in our photography careers, that if we can just help you avoid those or just mitigate that learning curve a little bit, that's kind of what we're here to do.
Yeah.
We're still making these mistakes daily.
Yes.
Again, we've not arrived at any sort of place of hierarchy here in the photo world.
Well, I state all the time, photography is a journey that does not have a destination. It doesn't. It doesn't have a finish line. Not to me.
It's a never-ending journey.
If I ever get to the point,
pit.
Well, no, that's true. If I ever get to the point to where I look back and I'm like, I've done it. I mean, I think I'll just quit.
Might as well put a nail in the coffin right there.
Yeah, because I feel like there's never an end to what you can learn. There's never an end to your skill sharpening, your editing. Like, you're always going to be refining and finding new ways to do things. Like, yeah, photography doesn't have a
no.
finish
Photography
line.
is a great equalizer in that way. It will certainly humble you whenever you think that you've arrived at some sort of place.
Yeah, I've noticed that the other day when I logged into LinkedIn for the first time in a bit, and I saw some like really good studio photographers. I'd been feeling halfway decent about some of my photo work lately, and I was like,
myself.
I'm like, oh no, I'm not. Nope. Not on that level.
No, well, I mean, I know.
There.
I know we talked about this off camera, and again, I've been exploring some different photography avenues. I recently started developing my own film in house, and as soon as I think that I've learned it, what do you know? I botched 4 rolls.
Yeah,
of film with not filling enough chemical in, or I'll go see somebody who did successfully develop their film with no blemishes, and I'm instantly humbled.
There you go.
Photography is a great humbler, great equalizer. And these are some things that you might be able to avoid by listening.
Yeah. So
some other things, Jared.
Hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah, hopefully this was helpful.
Hopefully we can help you avoid a mistake that we made.
Yeah, and if you've got a question about any of these, like, hey, how do I know if it's too bright or too dark? Or how do I know if my sets are inconsistent? We'd love to help you out. Reach out. Send us a message, DM, email.
Yeah, let us know.
Let us know.
Hey, if you like the podcast, send it to somebody who you also think may like it.
Yeah.
I said that
or
terribly.
could benefit from it.
Or could benefit from it. Also, just leave us a review.
I'm going to say, in return, we ask of a couple of things.
Yeah.
Stars and bars.
Leave us a rating. Leave
rating
us a
and
review.
reviews. Good or bad. We read them all.
Comments.
That don't hurt our feelings.
Yeah. No, you can't hurt my feelings.
On that note, Jared, here's the hard part.
Oof. We will catch y'all later.
He didn't make that very hard. Y'all have a good one.